Alexander Luthor, Lex Luthor for short. The most iconic Superman villain of all time and one of DC Comics' greatest creations, among those of Joker, Sinestro, and Reverse Flash. But Luthor among them stands as the second most beloved behind the Joker. The reason for this is due to his diversity in stories I've been told with him. In this video I want to personally share my own reasons why I love this character. As I said a second ago, this character has a fascinating diversity in stories that can be told with him. Let's go through the main aspects. So, he can be a mad scientist, an evil billionaire, a political candidate, a real estate swindler. Even with just these four aspects, several stories have been told and can be used to tell an incredible amount of stories. But the list goes on with smaller details with him. You can have him as a drug dealer early in his career, even though I really dislike that idea, but I'll talk about that later. Often he can have a religious tinge in his stories, with comparing God to Superman. He can be a hero in certain stories, an uneasy ally to Superman or the Justice League, or a straight up villain. He can be a sympathetic villain with the backstory of abuse from his father, or an absolute unlikable bastard who slaughters people and is an implied rapist, which again I'll talk about later. He can be someone who knows Superman as a kid, or someone who hates him out of pure ignorance, or because he's simply ruining his real estate scheme. Out of these, let me break down what I believe are the best attributes that make Luthor great. I believe a combination of the four main attributes of a political candidate, an evil billionaire, a mad scientist, and a real estate swindler are the best. It still gives you opportunities for all four types of Luthor that can easily mix together. When it comes to Lex being a drug dealer, like in the book President Luthor, I believe that is a horrible usage of the character. Yeah, I can explain why he has money with using his brains to develop drugs as a Heisenberg-esque character, but honestly that doesn't at all fit how I think of Lex. When I think of him, I usually think of him developing his company through real estate mixed with many branches of technological development, so the drug dealer depiction is one that I believe should be forgotten. Next, let's talk about the religious aspect of Lex that some interpretations have.
Because that should be upside down. Now, we know better now, don't we? The devils don't come from hell beneath us, no. No, they come from the sky.
The main one I can think of is DCEU Lex Luthor that attributes Superman to God, which dates back to his childhood abuse he received from Alexander Luthor Sr. in the DCEU, as implied in the film.
You above all. Because that's what God is.
See, what we call God depends upon our tribe, Clark Joe. Because God is tribal. God takes sides. No man in the sky intervened when I was a boy to deliver me from Daddy's fists and abominations. I figured out way back. God is all-powerful. He cannot be all good. They need to see the fraud you are.
I think this is an incredible layer that should be used more often. It gives Lex this added layer of religious hatred of Superman too, but also as a physical embodiment of the abuse he received as a child. Lex Luthor as an uneasy, heroic ally is one of my favorite tropes in Superman. Showing that Lex can put aside his hatred for a minute to help the world makes him more human, which can get lost. The human aspect he doesn't often show is something that can be extremely fascinating to finally see in stories. As an unsympathetic villain, there's fun in that too, just seeing a completely evil monster who only cares for himself and slaughters those in his way. Where this aspect is taken too far is once again in President Luthor, where it's implied that Luthor is a rapist, which takes him to a completely wrong direction. Luthor is not a villain I believe that would commit gross crimes. He'll commit most crimes, but not a gross crime like that. It's also just a subject that doesn't need to be there, and while the subject of rape is important, and I get the idea of showing how an evil corporate type can abuse his power in a gross way such as this, I just simply didn't need to see that with Lex Luthor. So personally, I believe the best Lex Luthor interpretation is one that can be a mad scientist, a real estate tycoon, a political candidate, and an evil billionaire, sympathetic with the Lionel Luthor backstory, but also at the same time a murderer who can be human at times, but is often cold. Having a flip to his personality where he can be reasonable if it affects him, but good luck getting him to reason if he's not. Motives with Lex can often vary from doing what he does to Superman through taking out anger from abuse he received from Lionel, to hatred of seeing a man so powerful who never had to work a day in his life, to achieve his status like Lex does in a lot of interpretations. Lex does have a very pull yourself by your bootstraps attitude of working hard and building your house rather than watching it be built for you. So seeing some alien from beyond the stars just come to Metropolis on a dime and the city just turns into essentially a warship state for Superman pisses Lex off because in his mind, he's been working day and night to perfect his vision of Metropolis over the years. He wants to be appreciated by the city for what he's done for them. Seeing the praise that Lex feels he deserves go to Superman, a man who out of the blue wants to dart through the town saving people, and essentially the presence of Lex is overshadowed by this thing, this alien. Lex doesn't view Kal-El as human at all. He is an it. My favorite line from Superman 2025 is when he's saying these exact things.
Superman. He's not a man. He's an it. A thing with a cocky grin and a stupid outfit that's somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation. Nothing's felt right since he showed up.
There are many layers of Lex's hatred of the Man of Steel. Religious levels, physical levels, envious levels, and even a bigoted, xenophobic level. These aspects of Luthor keep him relevant and boost his staying power. I'll start with saving Superman from death in Superman Blue. After Superman dies in the death of Superman, he returns in Reign of the Superman, and soon after he came back, he began feeling a surge in his powers. What happened was he was so supercharged from his return, he developed a whole new set of abilities. He turned into pure electricity and was dying until Lex Luthor came in to save the day. With a suit that could contain Clark's energy to where he could switch between Clark and Superman Blue now, unable to use his powers as Clark Kent, turning the character upside down. But what this does for Lex is gives him a new sense of pride over Clark to where he can be like, if not for me, you would have died. Your life was in my hands. Remember that. Another memorable moment was in Final Night where he was on vacation and there was a Sun Eater that was going to destroy the world, and he comes back to Metropolis to join in helping the Justice League and gives his help to the Justice League, thinking in his ego he's the only one who can help them, but in fact he's not the only one. The only person who could help in that story really was Hal Jordan, who killed the Sun Eater. Great moment. I'm not a big fan of All-Star Superman, but it does have a moment I do enjoy with Lex. His interview with Clark during the story, where it shows something about the relationship with Clark Kent, where Lex actually seems to be a fan of the humble reporter Clark Kent, the strapping farm boy from Kansas. He compares himself to Clark, where they're both overshadowed by Superman. It shows how Lex thinks and how he frames his debates of Superman through appealing to negative associations.
Can you imagine a better world, Kent? That's all I've ever asked. A world without Superman. The unattainable Lois Lane might have noticed good old Clark, pining away in the corner.
You keep talking about me, but I'm here to interview you.
I'm just saying, a strapping farm boy with brains, integrity, and no discernible style of his own. You're a prize catch for a cynical city girl. With him around, you're a parody of a man. A dullard, a cripple. Ugh. Next to Superman, even Lex Luthor's greatness is overshadowed.
Are you trying to intimidate me?
I'm trying to educate you. We all fall short of his sickening, inhuman perfection. Feel that, Kent. Real muscle. Not the gift of alien biochemistry, the product of hard work.
How Superman overshadows everyone through his presence, that even someone with the mind and brawn of Lex can be overshadowed. Like I said, not a fan of the story, but a great moment. The last moment I'll discuss in the story is in Darkseid War. So during the story, there's shenanigans going on with Darkseid. Superman adventures with Lex heading to Apocalypse via a mother box. When there, the locals have heard of Superman, but they think that the being is Lex Luthor. Lex does enjoy what worship he receives from the slaves on Apocalypse. After they do what they need to do, Lex stays on Apocalypse to bask in the new attention, being worshipped as a hero. I really enjoyed this mix-up from the slaves, who of course would hear about Superman from Darkseid often, but would never know what he looks like, so I really enjoyed this, and Lex basking in that attention is very in character for Lex. What I believe the best for a Lex Luthor book I've read is in Superman Secret Origin. Though I dislike certain choices like him knowing Clark as a kid, but it does have the abuse aspect. Lex runs away from home in the story, growing LexCorp from the ground up. Strokes of political intrigue with Sam Lane in the military. Mad scientist aspects with the creation of Parasite in the story, where he picked a guy from a crowd to make his dream come true, but instead he turned him into a lab rat. To add to that, Metallo is in the story as well, where a soldier who had been previously chosen by Sam Lane to date Lois was chosen to be turned into Metallo, fighting for Lex and Sam Lane. If you're just getting into Lex Luthor, Superman Secret Origin is a great place to start to begin understanding Lex as a character. Now, the worst Lex Luthor story, in my opinion, is President Luthor. They turned Lex Luthor into a drug-dealing rapist with a political career. I hate this version of Lex Luthor's backstory. And for a time, this was Luthor's origins, and it's awful. It is actively one of my least favorite comics I've ever read. While it's cool to see the build-up to Lex's presidency, a lot of aspects absolutely suck. Particularly Lex's origin. I do like what comes after this though in Batman/Superman, where he's actually president instead of being in the running stages for president to getting elected. Turning back to the positive, I believe the best adaptation of Lex to be the DC Animated Universe version. Clancy Brown encapsulates every positive attribute of Lex I've stated thus far. You absolutely cannot go wrong with this version. It's on par with Lex in the books. It's almost unfair for this version because he has so much more screen time in comparison to the others. So let me talk about a version of Lex that had much less screen time. Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor. Now before you burn me at the stake, hear me out on why I think this is a great adaptation of the character. On the surface, he doesn't seem at all like a good version of the character to most people. Look, I get it, but when you sit back and analyze him in BVS like I have, you realize some things about him. Something with him that adds some spice is the religious aspect. The constant comparison of Superman to God through the film does drone on people for being too much, but it supports a theme with humanity viewing Superman as God, which is what Lex believes, but that's not all it is for him. There's a motive with Lex to dethrone God to show the world that there is no God to worship. What they are taught are lies, essentially. They teach you to pray to God for mercy, but that didn't save him from the fists of his father, as Lex states. This aspect is why I very much respect this version of Lex. Though unconventional in the way he is shaky and kind of spastic, I believe he is still Lex Luthor. Given more development, I think he could have been an amazing Lex Luthor, which is true for a lot of DCEU characters. A lot of them are just very much wasted potential. Now, another adaptation I want to discuss is one I don't fully know, but I've just begun to learn. Smallville Lex Luthor. Recently, I started to watch the show, and I wanted to give some lip service because he is a popular version of the character. What I found interesting so far are the conversations with Lionel Luthor and his themes of destiny when it comes to his relationship with Clark in the show. Though I dislike a Lex Luthor who knows Superman as a kid, the conversations with his father, where he usually is verbally insulting Luthor, show how Lionel ended up creating what could be one of the most dastardly villains in the comics. In addition to that, Lionel is also willing to kill Lex to bury his skeletons in his closet.
We need to bring down the fire doors. The gas levels are too high. Your son will be sealed inside. I'm sorry, sir.
Do it.
An absolutely atrocious father. Now, with the themes of destiny, they are supported by the fortune teller in season 1 episode 6, who shows Lex his future as president and the blood on his hands. That scene did create for a compelling moment. Though I think the show is pretty mediocre to bad in a lot of its runtime so far, from my viewings I particularly dislike Lex's need to get approval from the Kents. It's just odd. But I do like what I've seen so far, though I'm only on season 1 episode 14 currently. Lastly, I'll talk about our most recent addition to the Lex adaptations, Nicholas Hoult Lex. This is definitely the version most people are going to be most familiar with now, so I feel like I should talk about what I like and dislike about him. With this version of Lex, he has a political prowess, which I do love. His plan with the Baravian military conflict is a good showcase of this aspect of him. Then we get multiple uses of the mad scientist Lex in the film with his creation of Bizarro. I mean, Ultraman. No, I lied, it's just Bizarro. I don't know why they decided to call him Ultraman, but whatever. Then we have the creation of the Pocket Dimension. Great instances of the mad genius early Lex interpretations from like the Golden Age. He also has a cold, unsympathetic side too with his murder of the man he thought was Superman's friend. I do like that aspect as well. What I believe is missing is any backstory related to Lionel or anything of his origin. He has the envy of Superman, but we don't see why. I believe the best versions of Lex give us a good look at the why But there is Man of Tomorrow coming, so there is still time for more development. One more nitpick I have is the swearing out of Luthor. Luthor can cuss, but sparingly. I'm not a fan of how much he swears here, and in another appearance, not in the movie. I'm not going to say where. It's just like, I don't want to hear Lex saying certain things, and they had him saying certain things, and I'm like, oh, okay. It's a little odd, a little weird. But he's not quite up there with the DCAU version of Lex, but he's serviceable so far. He's like, not great, but he's good. You know, like he's not up there. I see him as Lex, but I don't see him as the Lex. Now that I've gotten through talking about why I love Lex and adaptations I like, I want to give a spotlight to characters who were created by Lex. This is another aspect of Lex I think is underappreciated. We always get these weird, cool characters out of him. So let's start with the most iconic Lex creation, Bizarro. Bizarro is a brain-dead, stupid version of Superman that can clone himself to the point of creating a whole Bizarro world in his image. Read the story Superman Escape from Bizarro World. It's a great story. It shows Bizarro kidnapping Pa Kent and bringing him to Bizarro World because he just kind of wants his dad back because he thinks he is Clark Kent still. And in that story they show that Bizarro cloned himself like 500 billion times, creating the whole planet, which I think is actually really cool and kind of a unique thing I didn't even know about until I read Escape from Bizarro World. So yeah, read Superman Escape from Bizarro World. He's a fan favorite goofy character, and one I personally like too, and as a twisted lab experiment that went rogue. Then there is Superboy Connor Kent, the combination of both Lex and Superman, Lex's next clone after Bizarro. It's kind of cool seeing the evolution of how Lex's process works with cloning Superman, where you get the first time that it's purely just Superman's DNA getting cloned. Or the way that Lex is able to create the perfect clone is through combining Superman's DNA with his, and it's kind of that weird but cool thing where it's like Lex is his father, but it's also Superman. He shares the DNA of both, and it's really cool. Then there's Matrix, a shape-shifting character that Lex created, not being a clone of Superman at all, but taking the form of Kara Zor-El's Supergirl. She ended up being adopted by the Kents after Superman took her from Lex, but Lex eventually got to her again and they ended up dating, which is extremely weird. But I find Matrix an extremely interesting way to completely revamp the character of Supergirl, because DC didn't want to undo the real Kara Zor-El's death, who had died in Crisis on Infinite Earths like the decade prior. So they came up with Matrix. I have fun with it, even for as weird as it is, and like the weird relationship she kind of has with Kal-El Superboy. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into why I find the character of Lex Luthor interesting. What I believe are the best and worst ways to do this character. Nobody usually says this character is bad for a reason. I just wanted to give my personal 2 cents on the matter of Lex Luthor because I've been writing him a lot recently for some films I'm in the process of making, and he's just been on my mind a lot. Things that I want to do versus not do with this iconic character. I wanted to share my love for the greatest criminal mind of our time. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and, well, see you around.
Lex Luthor, the greatest criminal mind of our time.
Of our time?
I hereby serve notice.
He's serving notice to you.
That these walls
here.
Will you shut up, please, you
All right, take him away, boy.
You